y'all, and welcome to The Average Gal's Garden. I'm Sal, the Average Gal. This series is going to be about my garden and what goes on here and how it's evolved and is evolving constantly. So I want to preface all of this by saying, first of all, this is the Average Gal. I am not by any ways or means a master gardener. I don't get all caught up in the frou-frou for the Latin names and the genesis of the particular plants that I'm growing. A lot of what I do is experimental and just see how it goes. And hopefully, in the course of the series, you guys will find some things very relatable and you'll find something useful. So I'll start out by giving you a little bit of a background. I've been in this particular house for about 15 years, and the yard as it is now resembles nothing like it was when we first moved in. It's basically had an entire overhaul over the 15 years. Obviously not all at once. We do have a pool in the backyard right now, but we did not have one when we moved in. We started out with an above ground, and we had that for 3 or 4 years. I was extremely lucky. I put it for sale on Craigslist, and it sold in like an hour. I put it up, and some guy called and said, "Oh, I want the pool." And we basically gave it away. I got $50 or something to help pay for the pump, and I just wanted somebody to cart it away. At that time, we had put a wooden deck that went around a massive oak tree that was in our backyard, and we built the deck around the oak tree and up to the house and about halfway around the above ground pool. So none of that is here now. The first transformation, which was the above ground pool and the deck, and then it brings us to now, 15 years later, where I'm at with our in-ground pool and all of the landscaping that I did about 3 years ago to complement the backyard hardscape, which is the decking and the pool. At the time that I planted this garden I have now, I was not looking for anything with a lot of work that had to be done. I've got some back issues, and sometimes it can be difficult for me to work in the garden like I used to when I was younger. So the less maintenance or the easiest care is really what I'm looking for. Like I said, I'm an average gal with an average garden, and I'm looking to make some improvements on it again, and we'll see where we can go from that. So let's start off this series by giving everybody a tour of what I've got to work with now. And again, I'm an average gal with an average garden, like you'd see in thousands upon thousands of people's backyards all across the United States and probably in some other countries as well. And I will have obviously some different types of plants and flowers that are more inducive to the climate that we have here, but I also have some stuff that can be grown all over the country. So we'll just take a little tour and see what we come up with. So the orientation of my yard is, right now I am facing east. This is the back of my house, which is facing me, which is west. So where that gate is, I'm looking east. This is south. All these palms and the majority of the irises and everything that are back here, this is all on the west side. The gate, the rocks on the west side, and then that part is the north side of the backyard. I get a lot of sun, obviously with the tree. The big oak tree is gone, and I get a lot of sun now, so the house is super hot. However, you can sort of see that as the afternoon goes on and the sun moves, we start getting a little more shade from all of these trees. So that can be a benefit to trying to work in the garden a little later in the afternoon here during the summertime. During the wintertime, the sun sets further towards the south. So right now the sun, when it goes down, because we are in the middle of June, the sun during that time sets somewhere approximately there. And in the wintertime, as it moves further in south, it sets behind where these Arakia palms are. So we'll start the tour with the gate that comes from the front yard. It actually comes down the side of the house and into the backyard. And as you can probably see, I'll see if I can't zoom in there a little bit. this gate is looking a little worse for wear. So that will probably be one of the projects that I try to look at as we go down the road. I got pieces of wood falling off there. So you'll see that I have a hibiscus in a pot there. It's sort of scraggly looking. I didn't do too much of a trim on it this year, so I've got to do some work with that, and we'll explore some of that during the course of the series. You'll also see that, much like most of you, I have crap. I have junk. I got trash. I got stuff laying around in the backyard. Also be addressing some of that stuff. So as we move around the yard, the first thing you'll see, and you will definitely see a lot of these, is palms. We are in Florida after all. This particular palm that I'm shooting right now is an Arakia, and that's a clump that originally I bought and put into 2 of these big pots, exactly like the one that the hibiscus is in. You'll see them empty on the other side of the yard in a couple minutes. So the idea was, when we put in our new pool and we had to take out the large oak tree that was in the back, in order to do that, we lost a lot of our shade into the back of the house. So I had wanted to be able to come up with some beautiful thing that I could put in front of the sliding glass doors to the back of the house that would give us some shade. And I'll swing over there so you guys can see. Got a nice green porch there. And there's my 2 new sliders. This whole wall used to be 16 feet of glass. It was all single pane, sort of a lanai sort of situation that would come out into the backyard. And many years ago, we replaced those with dual pane 2 6-foot sliders. I had priced out doing and replacing them with the beautiful 16 feet of glass, and believe me, I would have taken out a second mortgage and given my first unborn child for that. It was way too expensive. So I opted to go off the shelf, and had our contractor open up, put a divider in the middle for us, and we went with 2 standard 6-foot sliders. It was way more economical, and honestly, it's fine. It's beautiful. We can still see out of those 2 windows into the fabulous pool, which you'll see off and on during the rest of the series. So the pool's been in for about, this in-ground pool's been in for about 3 or 4 years now, and we absolutely love it. It's fiberglass, and we can talk more about that in in the series. So back to the garden tour. So we're starting around, and you're going to see more hibiscus here. You're going to see one of my major problems you guys are going to be going through with me, my grass. When we put this grass in, I really didn't want it, but my husband wanted it. And I'll put in a couple pictures of how it looked after it was done, and it honestly did look really, really nice. But there's a whole story behind it. When we get to that part in the series, I'll explain what a below average thing I did, actually, that got it to this horrible state of weeds and dirt. So you'll see across this wall, that this fence, that I have a bunch more hibiscus, 4 more, and then we move down to the ponytail palm. And there's a whole story behind this ponytail palm that when we get to the palm situation, I'll explain. And from there, you're going to see a massive clump here of Arakia, another one. Now this bunch of Arakia palm was in the yard when we bought the house. And of course, 15 years ago, they are still going strong, and they've got this incredible sort of a root system that when we get to the palm part, we'll go more in depth to. There's this plant that's in front of it here. Believe it or not, 15 years ago, this was a housewarming gift from someone, and I'm not exactly sure what this is. I think it's like a japonica or something, but I'm not positive, so I have to sort of look that up. But it was given to us in a very small dish as a bonsai. And if any of you guys have ever tried to do a bonsai, it's absolutely time consuming. And you have to keep after it all the time, and it's certainly not what I wanted to do. So eventually I moved it into a pot outside my porch, and I just let it go, and it became quite a big little shrub. And then eventually when we put in this in-ground pool, I decided that I was going to take it out of that pot and put it into the ground and see what happens, and it's gone crazy. I constantly have to trim it back. As you can see, it loves where it's at, so that's something I may not move. And I've actually taken the cuttings and thrown some into the ground and had some fairly good success with them taking root. You can see the little sticks down there. So it's kind of crazy how that works, but it does. And so we'll move around, and I don't know by any means the names of all of our plants. The plants that I have here, there's a couple of palms. This one in particular, I cannot remember what the name of this is, so I'm going to have to look that up. I think it's a pretty common plant. This plant was also at the house when we bought it. I have transplanted it several times. I can't remember exactly where it was, but I think it was in the front yard at one time or on the side yard, and I have since taken it out and moved it into the back. Okay, so below here you're going to see this group of irises, and I think they call them African irises. I actually have a couple little blooms going on there, and I put these in when I did the landscape after we did the in-ground pool. So I did 3 separate clumps of them, and you'll see a super large. Okay, so there's 3 plants in each clump, and I've had varying successes of getting them to bloom, and I think it's been 3 years now. So this big batch this big huge clump here with 3, I've had several blooms on, and it looks like I've got one going on here today. The ones that bloomed first are these ones that were in the middle, which also has a bloom today, although it's kind of scraggly looking. It could just be because of the weather right now. It's super hot. We're heading into the summer here in Florida. And then I've got this last clump that I did here. No blooms at all. I'm not sure what's going on with them. I think maybe it's too much shade here underneath the erachias and with this crazy ass japonica or whatever it is that I don't know the name of, and I'll have to look up. Maybe it's getting too much shade. I also have a table with an umbrella here, and we're sort of semi in the shade right now, and if I happen to go away and leave that umbrella open, it casts shade over in this area too, so that could possibly be another reason. It could also be it just doesn't like the soil right there. I'm not sure, but we'll be working on some of that, maybe transplanting those over the course of the series, and we'll see what happens. This is another palm. This is a Pygmy Date, and it's a dual. So you can see there's 2 trunks coming out there. This was also in the yard when we bought the house 15 years ago. It's a very slow grower, as you can see. I think it was probably about 2 feet shorter. I'd say 2 to 3 feet shorter. When we moved in, it was pretty short. And I sort of left it where it was. I've never transplanted it. It's always lived right in this area, and it seems to like it, so I don't mess with it too much. The next thing we'll look at is a whole series of palms here. Okay, so the story behind these palms is in Pinellas County, the trees are protected. So when we put the pool in, we had to get a permit. You're always supposed to get a permit, by the way, and to take the tree out so that we could do the improvement to the backyard. And they granted it without too much trouble because we're doing an upgrade to the house by putting the pool in. Although some of you will probably disagree that it's an upgrade, but in Florida, it's definitely a plus for us, and it works for us. So when you take out your tree, depending on the size, the county decides what you have to replace it with. So you can go to the Pinellas County website, and I'll try to put that up there, and they have a list of approved trees to replace stuff with. And depending on the size of your tree, that will determine how many things you have to replace with. Our tree was so big, we needed 4. So out of the 4 that we originally got, 2 managed to make it. 1 is just a trunk. It's dead. I could probably go over there and rock it back and forth and knock it out. But I sort of like it in this clump of 3. And since the others have grown so much in the last 3 years or so, that the foliage is sort of covering the top of that, I've sort of left it there. And it's probably giving a home to some bugs and insects. And some of them are probably vital. And instead of killing them all, we're just going to try to take advantage of that trunk for a little while. We'll see what happens. We might have a big hurricane come and blow the darn thing down. Who knows? You're going to see that I have a pot here that has a canna lily in it. Actually has 4 canna lilies in it. And I got that idea from a trip that I took to Phoenix for work. And at the hotel I stayed at had beautiful pots that had a single canna lily in it with geraniums all around the bottom. So I haven't done the geranium thing, but I'm growing canna lilies down the side of my house, and that will be in another part of this series where we examine that bed and see what's going on. And every year or so I have to go through and sort of dig it up, and it gets overcrowded because they're a rhizome, and we'll sort of go over that. And of course, like I said, I'm no master gardener, and you will probably be able to research and find a lot of information about stuff like this online, but that's really not what I'm here for. I'm not really sort of trying to give you guys a horticulture lesson or anything like that. It's just, I'm the average gal, and I'm just doing my best to have an average garden that looks pretty nice. So next to that, this is a bird of paradise, but not your typical bird of paradise with all of the fabulous colored bloom that comes through. This is a white one, and it grows supposedly 6 or 8 feet high over time, or taller. And I planted it, and it was probably about 2 feet high or so, and over 3 years it's gotten about this big. It's a little slow grower, and of course I have not had any blooms on it, probably because of the soil or the watering conditions, things like that. And the irrigation issues I have, we will go into in another part of the series. This is just sort of an introduction to what I have in the yard. Behind all of this, down along the fence, I have a series of these really bright red plants, and they're called tea plants, T-I or Thai plants. I think they're tea plants is how it's pronounced, and they are a woody shrub. And out of this group that comes down the side of the yard here, I think 3 of them were in the yard when we bought the house, but in the front yard. I've transplanted them to the back. So believe it or not, they can be extremely long-lived, and we'll do a whole thing about how to propagate these. They're extremely easy to propagate, and believe it or not, because of my irrigation issues, I don't water all that often, and they get scraggly, and I don't trim them like I should. So those are all things we'll sort of go over as we continue through the series. You're going to see a series of little garden paths here, and of course my power thing on my fence. I've got several of those, a couple of those around the yard. I got 2 of them on the fence here, although one of them is messed up and I'll have to fix it. So I think that one is over here. Yep, there it is. It got wet or something, and it's got a ground fault interrupter, GFI. For those of you who know what that is, it's a safety feature, and the GFI I think blew on it, and it needs to be replaced, so I'll work on that. But you can see that I have a little garden path that I did towards each of these, and the whole idea when I did them 3 years ago was so that we could come back and be able to do Christmas lights or fans, or you know, have a band in the backyard with a big ass party. Who knows? So those will be a couple things that we take a look at later. Ooh, while I'm here, that guy is absolutely beautiful today. I can't believe how lucky I am right at this moment to see this guy. He sort of looks like an old man. And if I swing over here, I have a couple more that are trying to make it out. And I'm really surprised. Like I said earlier, I've had a few blooms on this clump of them. It's a lot of greenery. As you can see, not as many blooms. And it took it a year before they actually started to bloom. The first clump that started was this clump over here in the middle. This one looks a little scraggly because I came through this year and I cut out a lot of the dead brown leaves, and it hasn't died or anything, but it's sort of kicked back. Although it looks like that bloom that's there right now is coming out of that plant. So even though it's not got a lot of foliage right now, it seemed to me that it went ahead and tried to bloom. So they definitely need some work. Like I said, average gal, average garden. This palm right here, I believe, is a saw palmetto. It's been here since we bought the house. 15 years. And it's reincarnated itself numerous times. We'll go through more of that when I get to the palm section. And then down here, this is 2 clumps of bird of paradise. That was also part of what I put in 3 years ago or so when we put the pool in, hoping that I would get those fabulous, pretty, colorful blooms, but they have yet to bloom. I read somewhere that you can force them to bloom by regulating some fertilizer, some feed for them. So we'll have to explore that as we go through the series and see what happens. All right. And then last, we'll go through just a little bit quickly. So you'll see I have a big gate right here in the backyard. We are not on a main street, but we are on a moderately busy road in the back. And one of the things that drew us to the house was the fact that we had access right from the road into the backyard. And the idea was that eventually we would either put a travel trailer or some kind of a boat could go in here. So it's sort of an asset to have this big empty spot right here. But I don't know if we're going to keep it, because 15 years later we have yet to do any of that. So this could be something really interesting that we explore as we go down. I did put the rock in, and I did put this little paver thing, which you can see I ended right there with the intent that obviously something would be parked there. It's come in super handy when I've done major work. When we put the pool in, when we took down the original, or the deck that we had installed around our above ground pool, we're able to bring a flatbed trailer or a truck, or open the gate and go right out with all of the debris, or bring in soil or compost or whatever. So it is kind of handy having that big huge open space, and I'll probably try to keep it, but where this path ends I may start planting something along this part around here. Another thing that we'll explore during the series. Alright, you see this really horrible wooden thing here. So when they put the pool in, there is some plumbing and some electrical for our light in our pool that is there. And I saw somebody that built this bench and type of a thing and put over it, over something they had in their yard. And I thought that would be a great idea. So we went ahead and got the pressure treated lumber, and I even painted it all with some super good paint, not house paint, but outdoor paint. But you could see what the Florida weather did to it. It's in pretty bad shape. So that baby's gonna have to come out, and I'll have to rethink what I'm doing there to hide the plumbing. And then we'll go back around. There's some stuff over there for the pool, to control the pool. And we're back around to the house. So that's sort of an introduction to what I'm dealing with in the backyard. Like I said, I'm not a master gardener, and I'm not growing a huge intricate cottage garden here or anything. I'm trying to do a really nice suburban backyard, and something that I think the average gal can relate to that for sure. It's nothing super special, and I've had some hits or misses. Some things are above average, some things are below average. Either way, we'll just take our time tackling them and see what we can come up with. So I hope that this is a pretty decent introduction to what I'm dealing with here, and that you guys will tune in for the next episode. I look forward to seeing you guys. So thanks for joining me, and be safe, be happy.